Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Planning and Development Committee to order and welcome all those that are viewing by webcast and all our visitors that are here with us this morning. We'll open with asking if any council member has a declaration of pecuniary interest. They declare it now or at the appropriate time. Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Public meetings this morning, Bruce County Official Plan Amendment number 20816.06 is attached, and I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an official plan amendment, and the purpose of this is to allow for a pit or a quarry, and the proponents are Schumacher Kerr, and also Ron Davidson is the agent representing the Kerrs. Because this is we've had a lot of input from the neighbors on this particular application, and sometimes it's nice to just simply hold the public meeting first and allow members of the public to speak in favor or opposition to the application. And at that time, after we hear everything, concerns from council and the public will come back with a second report to make a further recommendation based on their review of the application and also what happened at today's meeting. This is a public meeting, so what will happen is the planner will give a brief overview of the application, after which time members of council have an opportunity to ask the planner any questions for the file, to seek clarity and so on. At some point, the chair will open up the public meeting to the floor and ask for any members of the public who would like to speak on the application, including the applicant. Should anybody desire to receive further notice of the decision of council, there is a sign-in sheet in the back, so it's important you add your name to the sign-in sheet. There is a fairly detailed report that's included in the package, and that was also posted to the county's website. And if any members of the public haven't seen it, it is available for review on the website. Additionally, we've asked Brianne to provide a summary of the application by way of a PowerPoint, and so I'll ask Brianne to come up and give that presentation. Oh, wrong one. We're good. We're getting there. There we go.
Okay, sorry about the delay there. Just wanted to get those new site plans out. So as Chris said, we have an application before us today for a sand and gravel pit. It's located in South Bruce, kind of in between Formosa and Teeswater on 789 Concession 10. So the applicant is Joe Kerr Limited, and the owners of the property are Dave and Elaine Shoemaker. A little bit about the company. From what I know, it is an aggregate producing company based out of the town of Wingham, and they have been doing aggregate projects in Bruce County and surrounding areas since 1927. So to get a pit operating, there's several steps in the process. First thing is it requires an amendment to the County of Bruce official plan, and then an amendment to the Municipality of South Bruce zoning bylaw, and then they require a license from the Ministry of Natural Resources. So today we're just looking at the Bruce County official plan amendment. So just a little bit about the license to provide some more background. The Category 3 Class A license is to extract up to 100,000 tons per year of aggregates, and this is an above water pit, so it has to be no closer than 1.5 meters above the established water table. So there's kind of two players in these types of approvals. There's the planning department that looks after the amendments, but then it's the Ministry of Natural Resources that's ultimately responsible for issuing the license for the pit once the redesignation and the rezoning to allow for the use has been done. So a little bit about the subject property. It is 193 acre parcel. There's a severed house, as you can kind of see on the north side of the property there, and then also a house on the larger farm parcel. Formosa Creek runs right through the property. There's a wetland there as well and a woodlot. So I'm going to skip over this slide because this is now changed, which is what you have in front of you there, and I'll actually pass over to the next one. So the extraction area is 17.1 hectares, and previously there was a much larger licensed area around that, but that has just been amended as of yesterday afternoon to 20.3 hectares. So the reason there's a slight difference between the extraction area and the licensed area is that's to allow for berming to occur, and there's also required setbacks from the ministry, which basically makes up the extra 3 hectares. And we would be licensing then, the official plan amendment would be for the licensed area. So in front of you, the public has them as well. We have that new site plan. I think it's the blue that looks at the site plan there, and then the inside orange color is the extraction area. And these will also be on the Bruce County website shortly if anyone would like to take a closer look at them. So looking again at the drawing here, the pit to the south there is going to be phase 1, and there'll be a processing facility there as well that will, because they'll be bringing in some recycled aggregates, and that is expected to be mostly rehabilitated before phase 2 to the north. There'll be no crushing or processing in phase 2, just extraction. So matters arising from agency circulation. We have no outstanding concerns. The only thing that's left at this point is that a haul route agreement is required between the municipality of South Bruce to address road upgrades and maintenance from wear and tear from the traffic coming from to and from the pit. And in terms of the public circulation, we did receive 3 written objections to the pit. 3 residents also visited the planning office to talk to us, and some of these concerns are going to be outlined throughout the next slides. So first I'll talk about the proposed haul route. This is difficult to see, but if we look at the red line first, as of now, the haul route is to go up Side Road 10B, which is a gravel road, and then to go west on Concession 14. The reason for that is because the bridges on Concession 10 and Concession 12 are not currently capable of handling those size of loads, but the municipality has intentions to fix the bridge on Concession 10. So if you look at the purple line, that would be the future haul route, although we don't know when that would necessarily occur. So there's some public concerns about the capability of Side Road 10 for a haul route because it is a dirt road and the dust that's going to come along with that. And there's also some concerns about the sight lines because there are some hills in the area for trucks. And as I said, this is not necessarily addressed at this point. However, there does need to be this haul route agreement in place. And we believe that we can still move forward on the planning process in the meantime. And if the haul route agreement isn't in place by the zoning stage, we can place a holding on the lands that basically prohibits any kind of extraction until that agreement is in place. And the agreement will look at anything from dust control to road improvements that may be necessary. So in terms of hydrogeology, some of the public concerns were the negative impacts on the watershed because there is that creek running through and a wetland, and they're also concerned about some of the neighboring wells. We had a hydrogeological study done, the proponent did, and they stated that no measurable impact from the pit on the quantity, quality, or temperature of groundwater discharging to the wetlands or to Formosa Creek, so they're not predicting any measurable impacts from the pit. And there will be a groundwater monitoring program implemented to constantly concern where that location of the water table is to ensure they're not going below it. And a field-based inventory of neighboring wells will be completed by the end of 2016 to look at whether or not there'll be any impacts on the neighbor's well. And there's also, as you saw on the previous photo, there's 2 pits, and so there needs to be a kind of an internal haul route that goes through as well, and that has to cross the creek and the wetland. So Saugeen Valley will have to issue the permit for that, but they said that they believe the application can go forward at this point and the permit can be dealt with at a later date. In terms of environmental impact, people are just generally concerned about the impact on any of the natural features that come along with a wetland and a woodlot. And there was a series of natural environment studies that were done, and they basically provided mitigation measures such as fencing type to ensure things aren't washing into the wetland, setbacks from those natural heritage features, progressive rehabilitation, and dust control. I cross-checked all of those recommendations, and they were incorporated into the site plans. And the environmental impact study said that no measurable negative impacts or cumulative negative impacts should occur to the natural heritage features or ecological functions identified on-site or off-site, provided the recommended mitigation measures are implemented. So we had some public concerns about noise, and of course berming is a common method to deal with noise, but there was concern about how those berms would be taken care of. So fairly extensive berming will be constructed along the property, especially along that processing facility there, and the vegetation is to be maintained by the pit operator. And there was a noise study that was completed, and recommendations were based on the Ministry of Environment's MPC 300 noise guidelines. And what that did is it limited the number of trucks per hour, so there's 16 passes per day that are allowed. It also set some extraction hours, 7 to 7, and some different provisions to deal with noise. And again, we cross-checked the recommendations from the noise study, and we found that they were reflected in the site plans. So in terms of rehabilitation, the public is concerned on the implications of the agricultural capacity post-rehabilitation. And ultimately, it's the Ministry of Natural Resources that's the agency responsible for proper rehabilitation. We'll certainly take a look at all of the plans. And we did find that recommendations from those other supporting studies, like the environmental impact study, were incorporated into their rehabilitation plan. And they are, as I mentioned, proposing progressive rehabilitation to rehabilitate most of one area before starting extraction on the second. And the site plan states that the site will be restored to a similar agricultural field cropping as existed prior to the extraction of the aggregate. So this slide is less relevant today because that slide I quickly flipped over. The licensed area used to be quite large. It was 28.2 hectares. So now it's gone down 8 hectares. So there was a lot of public concern with having such a large license area because they could just apply for an amendment to their license later on and expand the extraction area. So that, I believe, has been taken care of, and you can see that on your site plans. The licensed area is only slightly larger than the extraction area. So matters arising from provincial policy and the county official plan, aggregate extraction, generally speaking, is a permitted use in any agricultural areas, including prime agricultural areas. And the proponent has requested relief from the official plan with some of the locational criteria. For example, the Shoemaker's house, they're wanting to extract a little bit closer to that because they're the owners of the property. They're requesting from the ministry a 0-meter setback in some areas of the licensed boundary because there's a hydro corridor that is adjacent to the lot that they want to have less of a setback from. And they've also, the official plan says 50 meters to be set back from the wetland, but the environmental impact study supported that 30 meters would be sufficient. So again, this has changed because of the updated site plan. We were going to recommend a smaller OPA, not that large 28.2 hectares. And also, we are intending, based on the information we have today, to recommend to council at the next meeting, because this is just to be received information at this point, that council make a recommendation to the Ministry of Natural Resources to limit the tonnage of imported materials to 100,000 tons per year. And the reason we're concerned about imported materials is if there's no limit on it, what stops it from becoming a recycling or processing facility, essentially. And we know that residents also have concerns about the trucks on the road and what the impacts from that are going to be. So in terms of next steps, this report and presentation today's meeting are just intended to be received by council as information so we can have a bit of a discussion. And then we're going to be formulating a recommendation to be heard by council at the meeting on December 15th. And the zoning stage of the application will be in January 2016. The date on that is to be determined. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brianne. I'll ask council if they have any questions. Yes, Robert?
Mr. Chair, the imported material, what is the imported material? Is it asphalt that's been taken up to be stored there?
This might be something Rod Gibson. It's usually just, I'm not sure exactly what kind of recycled aggregates it is, but it's various recycled aggregates to be mixed in with the aggregates that are being extracted, and they're all exported together.
The only thing I was concerned with, if it was asphalt taken off other roads and stored there, since the water table, like, you know, the oils and stuff could filter down through into the water table and affect the neighboring wells. So I was just kind of curious of what they can bring in there.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe I'll get Bob Gibson to speak to that afterwards. We've got the consultant here, and he's involved in the licensing process of the application.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Yes, Ann?
I'm just more curious than the groundwater monitoring program. I just wanted some clarity. I'm assuming M&R carries it out, or who carries it out, and how often for the Ministry of the Environment?
So there would be the Ministry of Natural Resources likely, and I'll also ask maybe Bob to speak to that. I'm familiar, of course, with the planning aspects of this, but the Ministry of Natural Resources has their own separate process for licensing, so I'm not sure I can speak to that.
Okay, that's information that we can get a hold of. Are there any further questions from council, comments? If not, I will ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application, and when you do, state your name for the record, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Ron Davidson, planning consultant. I'm here representing Joe Kerr Construction, along with Bob Gibson, the aggregate consultant, a couple of representatives from Kerr Construction, and the owners, the Mr. and Mrs. Schumacher. I will keep this brief. I was going to focus primarily on addressing the concerns of the neighbors, but Brian has done that. I'll just add a few things here. So running in conjunction with this application, or these applications, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, is another type of an application and a separate process called the Aggregate Resource Act, otherwise known as the pit license process. That process began a couple of years ago. There was a meeting called a public information session held in the local municipality, and it was well attended, and there were a number of people concerned. That process has continued until recently, and we're kind of at the end of that, or as far as we can go. We have clearance letters now from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. That took a while. Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and that took a while. The county planning department, and rightfully so, chooses not to process official plan amendment applications and zoning bylaw amendment applications for gravel pits until we've taken the ARA, again the Aggregate Resource Act, or pit license applications as far as we can. So we're at that point. We do have one outstanding objector under the Aggregate Resource Act. The team of consultants will continue to try to work with that family. Short of that, it will be referred to the Ontario Municipal Board. So as you heard from Brian, we have scaled back the size of the operation. You can see on the drawing in front of you there at the north end of the property. Let me back up. There's basically two pits here. There's the south pit and the north pit. In the middle, there's a water course and there's a bridge that exists now, and the trucks will go across that bridge. The area to the north was originally larger, the blue area, not only in terms of the licensed area, but the extraction area as well. About a year ago, the extraction area was scaled back, and then as of yesterday, the licensed area is scaled back as well, so it's quite a bit smaller, and we're hoping that will resolve some of the concerns of some of the neighbors at the very least. There were some, as you heard, a couple of letters, 3 letters, I guess, submitted to the county raising various concerns. I'll add to a couple of points that you heard your planner speak to. The haulage route, there is no agreement in place just yet, but Kerr Construction has been working very closely with the municipality, and what's left now is for them to agree to the fine details and for Joe Kerr Construction to sign the haulage road agreement. There will be improvements of some sort required, and as you guys are probably aware, usually it's up to the proponent to contribute to the cause, if you will. Groundwater, there was a question asked about that. It's a good question. Right on the operational plan, that's one of 4 drawings that form part of the pit license drawings or site plans. One of those site plans, again, is called the operational plan. There are a series of notes. Note number 16 goes into great detail about that. I'm not going to explain everything, but what it says is the monitoring program will consist of 4 monitoring wells and 5 mini piezometers located in the wetland and Formosa Creek. Initial monitoring will occur for 1 year, with water levels being measured monthly. A field survey of off-site wells is currently being undertaken. That actually happened this week. There's one left to do. The hydrogeologist could not reach the one property owner. The hydrogeologist will review the data collected after 1 year and compile a report with recommendations and submit those to MNRF, the Conservation Authority, and the municipality for review. One of the concerns that was raised, jumping all over the place here, was about permanent storage being held on site. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, typically, they do allow for on-site storage because some of the machines need to be, or all the machines, I guess, need to operate on gas. There is a note on the operational plan that talks about how you handle fuel storage on the site, what it's contained in, and then there's a plan in case of spills. But in this particular case, actually, the Kerrs have advised that they will actually just be bringing the fuel in on an as-needed basis on the back of a truck. So that should take care of concerns about the permanent storage of fuel on the site. There's a question raised by the neighbor, one of the neighbors at least, about the bridge. And as you heard, we have been dealing with the Conservation Authority. The Conservation Authority has said that, yeah, you're good. We do want to see a development or a permit because it's within a regulated area. But at this time, they don't have any concerns about that bridge. But again, they will get another kick at the cat. I think issues regarding noise have been addressed by Brianne. Lastly, there was a comment about asphalt and concrete. Of course, the Ontario government strongly promotes recycling of asphalt and concrete, as they do promote the recycling of just about anything that can be recycled, because that is the right thing to do. It will be stored on site. The Aggregate Resource Act requires a slightly larger separation distance from the water table, whereas extraction can occur within 1.5 meters. Where the asphalt and recycling of concrete is going to be stored, there's got to be a 2-meter separation distance between the water table and that area. That's it for my presentation. Again, if there's more detailed answers that are required, Bob's here. He's more of an expert on certainly on the pit license and all the fine details of the plans that we've submitted. And I'm sure there will be a couple neighbors here that will want to ask some questions, and we're here to answer them. Thank you.
Very good, Ron. Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak to this application?
Morning, all.
Your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Sonny Roy. On the official plan, I'm resident of R2. The Schumacher pit, we're here to be against it. It is documented that a license will have a negative impact on the property values. Kerr states otherwise. They say there'll be no impact on the property values. Gravel Watch is very well known. The Ontario Municipal Property Assessment Corporation has acknowledged the negative impact of aggregate extraction operations can have on property values and have begun to reduce the assessment on some properties. Residential properties within half a kilometer by as much as 25%, and homes within 1 kilometer by as much as 15%. One neighbor has already listed their house for sale. So it goes to show you that there is an impact there due to the license application itself. A pit or quarry doesn't necessarily have to be in operation or even approved to affect the property values. The very fact that a license has been applied can lead to a decrease in the value of properties nearby. This information is under Gravel Watch for those who would like to follow up on it. Within Bruce County, right now we currently have 221 licenses for a total licensed area of 4,020 hectares of gravel. Municipality of South Bruce currently has 30 licenses for a total of 771 hectares. Colorado Township itself has 17 licenses. It seems to be gravel everywhere in Bruce County. There is gravel out there. The environmental impact study says there's no merit to explore alternatives such as relocating to another site because the resource exists on this particular property. Again, as shown, we have other pits in the area, and there is gravel at other locations. The intended pit, they also state, would have beneficial to the economy. They haven't stated how that would be, considering there's so many pits out there, and improve the competitiveness of the local sand and gravel market. I didn't know there was the price would fluctuate that much. I don't know how they gauge that, but it'd be interesting to know how that would work. The investment started back in October 1st of '07, and it ended on July 13th of 2013. That's 5 years, 9 months, give or take. A total of 2,010 days. People were on site 0.758% of the time. That's less than 1% of actual studies being done on that site over that course of 5 years and 9 months. Again, that's all in the report. Touch base on the haul route and the trucks. The contaminants alone, the noise, the air, the pollution, the vibration, during any part of the aggregate pit can cause adverse effects to human health and may render the property unfit for human use. In the operational plan for aggregate extraction, shipping alone would take its toll. They've stated 8 trucks per hour, 16 passes return trips, 13-hour days, 208 passes per day. That's 16 trucks per hour. That's over 1,000 trucks a week. If you live on that Concession 10 side road, if that doesn't have an impact on your quality of life, I don't know what does, because that's a truck, 16 trucks per hour. That's a lot. Now, you know, it doesn't take into effect the hauling of the trucks going by there every day by the residents, the actual construction of the pit itself, the hauling of the recycling materials, the Saturdays, which is a half day they want to operate on Saturdays also. As it stands now, we can hear traffic on Bruce County Road 4, and we're 1.25 miles away. We can hear the air brakes in the trucks. We can hear traffic on clear days. And we're right next door to this. So there is an impact to be felt by the residents. Weekly and monthly, we hear about our water issues in communities around the world. Ontario, Canada is no exceptions. Here is a proposed pit with a creek, recharge area, aquifers, protected lands surrounding it. Our water is our greatest asset. Testing will be done, like they've stated, which is good, but we need the testing to be done longer in phase 2, because it puts us closer to nearby residents. If there's an impact to our water systems, I haven't heard of any plans to rectify the situation, if it can be rectified, right? I mean, it's taken 1,000 years or more for the ground to be the way it is now, in this natural state, as a filtration system, and you just can't rehabilitate that. You just can't go back there, put gravel in and say, we're there. It's taken that long to get us where we are with our water system, and we can't afford to lose that, because, I mean, you can't sell a house if you don't have any water. In order for this to get this far, Kerr has asked for variations of the fencing bylaws, 0 setback from property lines, including the hydro towers, removal of hazard lands from the site plan. That's where the first phase will be going. There's hazard lands in that area, and they want those removed from the site plan. And alternative haul routes, which again they are still working on. At the present time, there's another quote from the Gravel Watch. At the present time, it falls on the citizens to report contaminant discharge to the MOE and the MNR after pits and quarries have been licensed. They just don't have the manpower to go there and check these places out all the time. At the initial start of the phase, they will go there maybe twice a year to check to make sure they're following all the conditions that have been set forward to them. But after that, the company pretty well has a self-report. And if you self-report, something happens, you'll be shut down. And that costs the people money. Under the EPA, legislation requires that the operation of a pit or quarry shall not cause any adverse effects or negative impacts on the health, safety, quality of life, and well-being of citizens, properties, and natural environment, and the environment. It is a legal obligation of the government ministries, boards, agencies, and municipalities in reviewing pit and quarry applications to make decisions to require and ensure that there will be no adverse effects or negative impacts on the health and safety, quality of life, and well-being of citizens, properties, and natural environment, and the environment itself. So it's a lot to take in. There's a lot of information they put forward for the people to look at. It's a long time coming. Now, with the new licensed areas of yesterday, which is good news, don't get me wrong, because it would put us in a more dire predicament. The 10 to 15 years is the life expectancy of the pit. Rehabilitation, a little bit longer. Recycling could run the plant even longer than that. Recycling has its own issues, right? You're bringing in foreign materials to the area and you're using them in their operation. Once, and if this is approved, the permitted uses for aggregate extractions may not be clear. Under permitted uses in the plan, you have recycling, saw houses, concrete batching plants. So they can bring in a temporary concrete plant and set it up in the processing area, and we can't do nothing about it because the rezoning has been approved. That's in the Aggregate Act, ARA I think it's called. So the approved rezoning would have a concrete batching plant in it too. That's pretty well all I have. Thank you for hearing me out.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Anyone else from the public would like to speak?
My name is Helga Lodge, and I'm living on Side Road 10B. I have 3 property along the line, and I'm concerned about my neighbor here brought everything up, so I have little to say about it. But I'm concerned about the adverse effects on human health, declining of property values, stress, noise pollution, air pollution, all this. But water quality most in my mind, since I was a farmer and I know what it means. And on Side Road 10B, it would have been, if this chosen for traffic, there will be excessive widening of the road needed, plus air dust pollution has to be addressed, and possible hardship Side Road 10B. If that's something to think about.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public?
Hello, my name is Deborah Harper. I'm here on behalf of myself and my husband Jeff. You will have a couple of letters that we have submitted. I think we are the only we're the family that's the outstanding objector. I live on part lot 10, so we are right beside where the pit's going to be, where phase 2 will be. And so as far as I'm concerned, our property is would be the one that's the most affected by this. Sonny has made a lot of good points, so I reiterate the comments that he's made as well. Our concern is, again, property values. We're the property that has our house up for sale. I can tell you right now that our real estate agent has told us there are many people that are interested in our house, but once they find out that there's a gravel pit going in, it stops there. And so we are very, very concerned that we are not going to be able to sell our house ever. We're going to be aging. We've lived there for 21 years now. Ultimately, our bedroom's upstairs right now, and so we want to sell at some point in time because our boys are leaving. They've gone off to college and university, so we want to downsize our house. If we can never sell our house, well, or if we have to sell it at quite a loss, where's that benefiting us? We're not seeing any benefit from that. And again, yes, our well, we have concerns about the well and our enjoyment of the property, because we're going to lose the enjoyment of our property if there's trucks around, and won't even probably be able to open my windows in the summertime. We've got a beautiful deck out the back to be able to sit there and enjoy it without noise if it's on a Saturday or whatever, and I don't understand why we should have to, because they want to put this pit in, why we should have to be penalized for it, is what I kind of feel that is happening here. Just trying to think what else. As well, I've got a lot of health issues, and I just have a concern about if they're changing the state, what is going to be coming our way. And, I just don't want to see myself get into any more. I've got chronic illness, and I do have allergies and stuff like that, and I'm just concerned about that as well. So I think that's all I have to say, so thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Paul Fisher, concession 10, lots 4 and 5, been there 12 years. I'm an organic farmer and somewhat of an environmentalist. I know your studies have been quite neglectful. The biggest one being your acoustic has nothing to do with the valley itself, the huge hills those trucks are going up and down. Jake breaks, I know my cattle during grain season want nothing to do with the fence line anywhere along the road when the big trucks are going up and down the hill. That's the acoustics reverberate through the valley for miles. It's an incredible thing, really. You can holler and hear it. 10 minutes later, it's echoing back at you. And when those trucks go down through there, from one end of the valley to the other, you'll hear it, unquestionably. I have heard no mention of the animals. I try to promote a corridor, a natural wildlife corridor through that valley. It's one of the few that's left. Everybody cash crops and knocks down all your tree lines and fence lines and everything else, that the animals have no place to migrate, to go to their different seasonal feeding grounds, and I've heard nothing of which animals, indigenous animals, are at risk here. I know from your snapping turtles to speckled trout, there's a lot of different things that are becoming rare and rare all the time, and I think there's a lot going to be at risk there. The groundwater table, as you state, to me, it fluctuates greatly, and I mean 1.5 meters is just a very, very minimal distance to put between. The hill on the back side of it is so riddled with springs, it's outrageous. It's the supply of the Formosa Creek. I'd say 30 to 40% of the water that flows across the bridge that you want to redo would come out of that hill behind it. And all your banging, digging, and whatnot, what's it going to do to that groundwater? To study it for 1 year after seems like a joke to me. They're going to be at it for years and years, and as they get deeper and deeper, that's when we're going to want to monitor, what's going on with our water table. As you say, there's a great amount of gravel in South Bruce. It's everywhere. And there are a lot of places that have applied for gravel pit licenses that may be a little bit further out, but not so heavily populated. And I really would like to approach the elephant in the room here. The proximity to this new DGR test well that we've been told will be less than a 10% chance, and they're not going to do nothing until 2040 and everything else. The fact that it's less than 2/3 of a mile away, I really kind of wonder if that isn't the sole purpose this gravel pit is going in, and the concrete. They'll be producing the concrete in the tons of millions of tons for this DGR. And I have no doubt in my mind that that's what the intention is here. And I think let's get the elephant out of the room. Let's discuss what if this is going to be the main reason why this gravel pit's going in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? We appreciate your comments this morning. I'm going to allow council maybe to ask some questions in conclusion and to wrap this up, and then we'll move on. It's taken quite a bit of time. But does council have any questions at this point? Yes, Stan?
I do have a concern about only monitoring the groundwater for 1 year. It sounds great for the 1 year, but I don't think it's long enough. And our water is tremendously important, whether it's groundwater or surface water or in the lakes. And I feel we should somehow, somebody needs to provide, whether it's the proponent or the ministry. I agree. From our other issues, the ministry, especially M&R, is very understaffed, and from dealing with them with windmills or both the Ministry of the Environment and M&R in different issues throughout the years, the cuts to those two ministries has made monitoring very difficult. So I would like to see some provisions for monitoring over the term of the operation.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Good suggestion. Anyone else? Janice?
To a question and a comment, and I agree with you, Mayor Eady, I mean, we certainly have enough quarries in my municipality as well, and the M&R, the cutbacks are quite substantial, and monitoring has almost disappeared. I think it's once every 5 years or something that an inspector actually goes out and monitors a situation, and that's a huge concern for me too. How many homes are affected that are in within a fairly close radius? I'm sorry, I was looking all over this report and I wasn't able to find out how many homes are affected.
Does anyone have an answer? Bob, do you have any comment on that?
Actually, there, not counting the Shoemaker home, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes that are affected that are within, well, I'd say a kilometer of it, okay?
Okay, Ron, do you have a clarification
Yes,
you would like to make?
I'm not going to argue anything because I respect the fact that we're over our time already. So 2 things. With regard to monitoring, yes, perhaps I confused you. Monitoring is not going to stop after one year. Monitoring is going to, after 1 year, the hydrogeologist is going to come up with a recommendation in terms of how much more monitoring should occur. Bob was just whispering in my ear here that the trouble to go to establish the monitoring wells for 1 year and then stop, that's not going to happen. The monitoring will continue. The decision has to be made after 1 year, just how often and how much. I guess how often it's going to be happening. So it will continue.
That's the problem with things. They will continue, but I think it should be established at the time.
Yeah.
1 year just doesn't, and say, well, we'll do it once a year after, or once every 5 years.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd sooner see it established at the time. It's much harder to get it afterwards.
Yeah. And it will be established, and that's something that's the municipality and MNRF will have a say in the monitoring program. So it will happen.
Okay.
Secondly, and very quickly here, the so-called elephant in the room, not sure why that comment was brought up. There is no proposal here to mix concrete on the site. And the pit's going to be used as every other pit is used for, so Joe Kerr Construction can bid on projects, big or small. But it's for sand and gravel. There will not be concrete on the property. Concrete.
Okay, thank you.
Patching plant. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks.
We do appreciate the comments this morning. As you know, this is for information. There will be a recommendation come forward at the December 15th council meeting. Committee and staff will review. So I think we can move on. The recommendation, I should read it, that this report be received as information. Comments received from the public and the Planning Development Committee will contribute to the formulation of the recommendation to be presented at the Planning and Development Committee meeting on December 15th, 2016. Is that in the form of a motion or? Yeah. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Robert, seconded by Janice. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Similar to the last application, this is a county plan amendment and same process. In this case, I'll be making the presentation and providing a review of the report, questions from council, and then opening it up to the public. This is an official plan amendment, and for the most part, the lands here are designated as agriculture with some hazards on the property. And under the existing county plan policies, there are some exceptions for if you're a farmer to have an on-farm business associated with that. And it could be something such as woodworking typically. We're seeing a lot more of, particularly with the growth of the Mennonite community in the area. If you go to the map on the property, what you'll see, and I'll explain sort of the rationale behind the amendment, is that there was a residential unit that was severed off of this farm. You can see the farm up here where my cursor is. This is what I would call the home farm, and it has some existing buildings on it. In fact, there appears to be woodworking and so on going on the home farm. There's a small lot just under 0.8 of an acre located along Hayes Lake Avenue, and on that property there's an older farmhouse, and then in behind it there's a barn, except the barn is still included with the home property. So it would have been potentially an earlier surplus farm severance dwelling, perhaps from our records suggesting back in the early 70s, and the practice now would sort of be to take the barn with the property, so it wouldn't create an MDS conflict. But in this case, you have the house severed in an older bank barn that's located in behind the property. You can see from the blue line on the map is the proposed area to be severed. So the purpose of the amendment is to take off some lands from the back farm or the home farm and add them onto this house. And Mr. Martin is the applicant under the county plan. It's not a farm parcel, so you don't get as of right types of permitted uses on the property for industrial uses and so on and so forth. So it's simply a non-farm lot. And what Mr. Martin is proposing is to begin to expand it, take in that barn, provide some room for further expansion for another building, and the proposed business is woodworking and a woodworking and trim business on the subject land. And so as part of these applications, we generally circulate them to local municipalities and to agencies such as the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority and so on and so forth. And we also provide in the reports an interpretation of what we feel to be the salient elements at the provincial level in terms of the PPS and also the county plan. And there, in that picture, you can get sort of a bit of a better view of the property. And you can see this bold line in the back is the proposed new property boundary. There's the house, the smaller old bank barn in the back, and I would suggest some room for expansion. I believe was proposed at roughly 10,000 square feet, and likely to be located up in this area. And the reason I say that is because there's a creek that runs through the property. You can see it on this map here. And the blue is the area of what's called environmental hazard. And so the proposed amendment would take all of the land, some of it coming out of hazard, into agricultural special, bringing in these back lands, which are agriculture, to add to the lot. In terms of the actual size of I'll just go back to the top of the report so I can give you an idea in terms of the actual size there. Currently 0.73 of an acre, and by the time it was brought in, it would be 3.34 acres to facilitate the operation. And he describes it as a mill workshop for making trim, paneling, so on, general planing for the chair industry. I mentioned that we've included in the report a general review and what the other agencies said. With the Saugeen Conservation Authority, they said it was pretty much the obvious, is that it's located as hazard. There's issues associated with that creek. And when you see the property, if you're from the road, the house is sort of built up on a bit of a ledge or a hill, fairly small building envelope, and then a steep slope down towards the creek. So one of our recommendation is that this not be approved, but if you do approve it, I would perhaps recommend to you that the hazard land be left in place because it doesn't really seem to be suitable a place to put buildings or structures down in that low-lying area. So that's sort of a rundown from the Conservation Authority side of it. As you know, we always include that review of the provincial policy statement in here, and the provincial policies kind of mirror what goes on in the county plan, and is that industrial uses and commercial uses of a general nature, such as manufacturing, kind of belong in urban areas where there's land set aside for those uses. And the county plan takes that approach at a regional level, saying the countryside should be preserved for farming, and in the agricultural area and the rural areas preserved for resource-based use, such as pits and quarries, and also farming. But then it does make these special exceptions, and it says that there's a need for on-farm income if you're a bona fide farmer. And so the PPS policies are very similar to what's in the county plan. So the summary of that is, in terms of the recommendation, is from my perspective, I don't feel that it would merit the placement of a industrial use in this location. We understand from council and from others in the community there's a compelling argument and need for economic development opportunities within the county, and in fact the county plan certainly supports that approach, but it becomes one of location. So going from a situation where there's special criteria if you are a farmer to have secondary employment, but the need for the amendment in this case is simply it appears as an industrial operation with no farm associated with it, located out in the agricultural area, perhaps dictating a different location than this one. So in the end, a recommendation for refusal, but if you do consider approval, just sort of take a look at this map, is I wouldn't be inclined to be including those hazard land areas within the building envelope area, and I would just leave those as hazard.
Okay, thank you, Chris. The recommendation, we'll bring that forward and we can deal with that, and then comments. Bruce County Official Plan Amendment number 213-16.11 not be approved. If approved, the amendment should be modified so only the agricultural area is redesignated to agricultural area with exceptions, leaving the hazard land area designation unchanged. Now that can't be, I guess we either approve it or not approve it and then move to the next second part.
Just in terms of a matter of protocol, what we should probably, because it is a public meeting, what we should perhaps do is allow council to ask any questions of myself, and then we would open it up to the public to comment and then consider the recommendation.
Okay, council first. Ann?
Sorry, this is just for clarity. I should let Mitch go first since it's his municipality. But so I just want to be clear. There would be room for this industry out of the hazard lands, just behind there, where the old barn or shed is. So there would be room for it. That's what I'm without going into the hazard lands, right?
So on the face of it, I would say it would be tight. But having said that, once the plan amendment is in place, then it's rezoned, and then in that case, the municipality would apply a zoning bylaw and just have standard setbacks and so on and so forth. And so when it comes time to, if this gets approved and it gets time to rezone it, you should ask for a detailed site plan scaled from the applicant to ensure that either it fits exactly with the A1 zoning provisions or you require a special exception to the A1 zone provisions. It's not currently permitted now within your zoning, so he needs an exception. And it's often the case there could be other things that need to be modified within the zoning at the same time. So it need not, in terms of whether it fits on that site, need not be an issue with regard to the actual plan amendment, but you should review that site plan prior to the zoning in case you have to pass any special provisions to make it fit or reduce the size of the building.
Okay, and the other question I had was, so it's kind of unusual when the person didn't own the land around it, so the extra land came from somebody else, another owner, and so if there's not enough land out of the hazard, couldn't they just make the chunk a little bit bigger to fit?
So in terms of process, needs the plan amendment first to allow for the use on the property. And then secondly, in part of that plan amendment, he's asking for an amendment to in a larger area than what he owns right now. And if he's successful with the plan amendment, then there's also the zoning, and the zoning would zone this little lot plus the proposed lot addition. So he has zoning coverage and plan coverage, and then he would go for a severance application, and the severance application would reflect the boundaries of those two properties. If you looked at this as a small residential lot that was trapped in the countryside, you couldn't do anything with it because it's too small. We have had proposals before where there's a lot addition from the abutting farm. They're not necessarily a problem. Somebody, maybe you can't fit your tile bed, maybe there's no accessory buildings, there could be some conflict. So those are dealt with on a routine basis. So the issue here is not really one of the lot size, other than the applicant has to have it bigger to fit what he wants. The issue from my perspective is really whether or not it belongs in that location, seeing as there's no link to being a bona fide farmer.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mitch?
I guess my comment would be we tried doing this in Holyrood with a woodworking facility, and we had some very upset community members with, and I'm assuming it's going to be, you'll be running a diesel generator? Yeah, so that was one of our concerns. The next door neighbor with the constant sound of a generator going, and then obviously dust was another concern. So I think this is where we want. I know here in Kinloss Council, this is something that we have discussed before. We think this is good planning to have these types of facilities out in the country, so then we're not impacting the neighbors as much. So that's my comment.
Mike?
My question, Chris, is back to the hazard land mapping, and then it says it's the Conservation Authority, so that's been provided by the Conservation Authority. Is that the limit, including the buffer? So, I mean, the Conservation Authority does not know the exact hazard land mapping on much of what's in the rural areas, so we add a 30-meter buffer to that. So the only way you will determine the hazard land mapping is for a site visit with SCVA staff, and I guess that's my question. Is this the accurate mapping of the hazard land, or does this include the 30-meter buffer?
So it includes a buffer, and it's because this is from the county plan map. So the county plan map designates it in the plan as hazard. And when, given the age of the creek or stream and the volume of water and the susceptibility to flooding and the size of the floodplain and so on, when the county plan was done and the maps were updated when we did the 5-year review, this would have been provided to us by the Conservation Authority. And so they would look at the center line of the stream, how steep the banks are, the history of flooding, and come up with a setback. And you're going to ask me what that is, and of course I don't know. It's one of the problems with our existing mapping that we're trying to overcome with the new mapping, saying here's the thread of the creek, this is how we mapped it, and this is what the setback is, this is where it's going to flood to. But it's just a case in this case where it's the county plan map and asking to have it pulled back. There is a provision in if the person could make a case through the zoning process that those lands are not hazardous, the county plan does allow for minor modifications to the boundary of a hazard area through the zoning. And if that's the case, the proponent should be making that pitch at the municipality that the hazard should be cut back. When I look at it and drive by, it really looks like hazard.
But, well, I guess my point is, what we're representing on the map here may not be totally accurate to the regulated area. The regulated area could be smaller than this, or it could be bigger than this.
Regulated area mapping doesn't follow the zoning mapping, and in fact...
Well, wouldn't that be the argument you would make because why it's hazard land or not? Most generally, wouldn't that, like around a creek like that, you would say the regulated area is hazard map?
The regulated area mapping is based on an area where if you wanted to put in a building or a permit under that regulation, a building or structure under that regulation, then you would require a permit. And there could be some cases whereby they would simply allow it and say you're permitted within that area because it could be flood-proofed or whatever the case might be. The county plan map is something totally different. It's a policy map that's saying this is where areas are hazardous, is not really available for development, should not put buildings or structures in there. I'm answering your question in a very roundabout way because I don't, the regulated area does not always correspond with an area that's shown as hazard in a county OP or in the zoning bylaw.
And I don't want to really belabor this, but really the hazard land designation is on this particular piece because of the water hazard.
Yes. Yes.
All right, any other comments from council? I would ask if there's anyone from the public that would like to speak to this application. Yes, please state your name for the record.
Edward Martin, the applicant. Just to clarify some of these, say the hazard area there, there's a line drawn there. I'm not, there's a considerable height distance between the actual building site and the creek. It's not like it's, as you can see, the line drawn there, that's it's quite a bit of slope in there toward the creek. Just to make that, just to clarify that section there.
So the building site would be high and dry?
That's probably from the standard creek level to the floor level will probably be, could be 15 feet.
Okay.
Just approximately.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, council, how would you like to deal with this application? Yes, Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do wish to apologize to council that this recommendation should have been caught by way of the review prior to publication. It is quite unusual to have both the first part be non-approval and then a suggestion once it's unapproved. So with committee's indulgence, the recommendation would be to split them apart and read the first motion into the public record and seek a mover and seconder, and then subject to that, again, consider the second recommendation as a standalone recommendation.
So just a recommendation for this recommendation for
We'll need a motion and or a mover and a seconder to approve the first part of the recommendation. We'll deal with that. That Bruce County Official Plan Amendment Number 213-1611 not be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder?
It's like a double negative.
Moved by Milt, seconded by Paul. Any further discussion? Yes, Ann?
My biggest concern was the hazard land, and I just wanted to be reassured that the building would be in that part, and that because we all know east of Kinlow, there's tons of water. And so the height difference, you know, I think that the hazard land is constant and the building can go there, then I'm satisfied on the hazard land.
Yes, I think that's the clarification that we received. Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification before you call it to vote, that this recommendation states that it would not be approved.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion is defeated. We can move on and consider the second part of that as a further motion. The amendment should be modified so only the agricultural area is redesignated to agricultural area with exemptions, leaving the hazard land area designation unchanged. Now, is that what we're looking for or not quite? Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would recommend one slight modification to the wording of it, and that being that the official plan amendment number 213-16.11 be approved, and that an amendment should be introduced to modify the agricultural land and the rest.
Better. You've heard the recommendation. Any further discussion?
I just want to be clear, so the agricultural land can be approved, means that boundary can include more agricultural land, or just the fact that you're adding the agricultural land that's in this diagram?
Can you clarify that,
Yes,
Chris?
so I think what the CAO is suggesting is that she would like to consider a recommendation simply for approval, and what's been applied for is simply that the entire parcel be as agriculture, which would remove the hazard. I think then what she would suggest is that there be a third resolution, that it be modified to include the hazard.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, that the suggestion is the recommendation needs to include that you're approving the OPA. That was the first suggestion. The second piece is that if you choose to approve it, that the agricultural area be redesignated to agricultural area with exceptions.
Everyone's clear now? You've heard the recommendation. Moved by Milt, seconded by Mitch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Now, I have to get business here. Just give me a second.
One more delegation, I think, there.
Okay. Gemma?
Yes.
Okay. The next item, we're pleased to have another delegation. We have Gemma Mendez-Smith from the 4 County Labor Market Planning Board. Gemma, sorry for keeping you so long and before you present, but we certainly look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Council and general public. I would like to today share with you some of the information we collected through the Employer One survey and also ask for consideration by Council. So I'll move forward with the presentation. I'll make my request at the end. And I think I turned it off. So what we're looking for is collaboration, and in the last 2 years, we've been able to deploy the Employer One survey. And in the first year, we were able to receive 222 overall responses from employers, and that's across the 4 counties of Bruce Grey, Huron, and Perth. In our second year, in January of 2016, we were able to get 425 completed responses, which represents a statistical sample size for us as we move forward. We're really excited about that, and what we want to make sure is that each of our counties has a statistical sample size, that it's data that we can really trust and work with. So this is kind of one of our requests that we're doing. That we're making today. So what we know is that youth unemployment is around 16% in Bruce County. It's a little bit higher than the province, and we're just looking at this, and this is from the National Household Survey of 2011. We're waiting with a bated breath to see what the census of 2016 will say around our youth unemployment. But we feel like understanding what happens in the labor market and what employers are looking for will help us do a better job of getting our youth skilled for the jobs that are available. And so in Bruce County, we had about 80 employers complete our survey for the Employer One. Actually, this is the completes and incompletes, where most of the responses to the questions were completed. And so I'll share that with you today. 76% of the employers that responded to the survey hired in 2015, with 33% of them saying that they had hard-to-fill positions. And this is something that we're seeing across the four-county region. And 63 of those that responded said that they were planning to hire in 2016. So if they're having hard-to-fill positions in 2015 and they're continuing to look for people to fill positions in 2016, we know that the problem is starting to now compound, and we are hearing that every day from our employers and the businesses that they can't find the skills that they're looking for. So how can we use this information that we're collecting to make sure that we're upskilling people to meet those demands? So some of the resources that we use to help figure out what's happening in our local labor market is our Employer One survey that I'm sharing the rest of the information with you a little bit later, and then the Vicinity Jobs database that we purchase for online jobs that have been posted. And there's a lot of activity happening in Bruce County, and we want to make sure that with all of what's happening in Bruce County, whether it's businesses growing, we heard the announcement yesterday that Gailey is planning an expansion and, keeping jobs and adding jobs, we want to make sure that those skills can be found in our local community. So this is how we're able to do that as we look at what's happening locally. So our economic profile is that most of our employers hire full-time, which is excellent for us. It really speaks to stability in our labor market. And this is where people are excited about joining the labor market if they know that they can find some stability there. So 78% of the employees are full-time in Bruce County labor market of the employers who responded. And we're looking at about 14% saying they have employees under 25 years of age, and about 14% saying that they have employees over 55. So we have a good mix in between that is going to remain in the labor market as long as they stay living and working in Bruce County. For recruitment, employers are using word of mouth as their preferred method, and what we are saying to them, though, is they may be limiting the access pool that they have if this is their preferred method. So we're recommending to them just to explore some different ways of being able to connect with the local labor market and even outside of the area to be able to connect with the right talent that they're looking for. When we look at the positions that were filled in 2015, we see most of those positions actually require some post-secondary education, whether it be college or university or a certificate. So we're saying to our workforce, and particularly our high school students, when you're looking to enter the labor market, make sure you're tapping into those skills that employers are looking to have, and then you will be successful in our local community. Through the Employer One survey, 59 of the employers that responded filled 534 jobs. And so we see that it's happening. It really is happening with economic development and workforce development working together, but we're remembering that there is a struggle to find those. And we're saying to employers, so you recruit from that local talent, and every once in a while, then you can recruit outside. We recently launched our migration report, characteristics report in 2016, and it actually demonstrates where people are moving from into Bruce County. And we can say to employers, use that as a strategy. If you know people are moving in from a particular area in high numbers, maybe that's a great recruitment area that you can move to recruit for positions to fill. So some of those hard-to-fill positions were media sales, equipment technicians, registered nurses, and every time we look at our vicinity data, these are the jobs that come up, particularly around registered nurses and managers. And again, those jobs require post-secondary training. So getting this information out ahead of time so people can prepare and plan their career track and their education track will help them to be more successful in integrating into the labor market. And the reasons why employers found them hard to fill is not enough applicants. And there's that first one. Applicants not meeting those qualifications, so the credentials that they need, and applicants not meeting work experience. So the third one is a bit of a double-edged sword where we say to employers, if we don't give young people or people who don't have work experience, then they won't have experience to tell you they have. So it's kind of that revolving door, and we're saying, open up your doors to co-op, experiential learning opportunities where people do gain some experience, even through volunteerism. And then they're able to bring some value to your labor market as well. So we have to work hand in hand in getting that work experience piece covered. And when we asked employers, and like we mentioned before, a lot of those positions were in those post-secondary tertiary education, college and university, and of course our production, service occupations, and apprenticeships are looking through that. Definitely right out of high school you can enter those positions. And some people decide that they want to enter the labor market right out of high school, and then they will career ladder through whatever industry or sector they enter, and so those are many opportunities there for them. So our request to the county is to sign an MOU with us, a memorandum of understanding, and the collaboration that we will be entering in with you is to say we work together in getting 92 responses, which is the statistically valid sample size we need for Bruce County. So we were a little bit shy of that last year, but we're hoping as we push forward, third year in, we've got some great information to move forward with, that we can get up to that at minimum 92 responses. And the MOU, the activity of the county at this stage, the staff were asking to support us by getting the information out. We would do all of the heavy lifting, we prepare all of the marketing materials, all of the reminders to employers, and we're saying just get that out to your employers and encourage them as much as you can to respond to this survey, because as much as we can get this information, it really provides the foundation and all of the evidence we need to take it to the next level, to either bring training into the community or take that out to the ministry to say, here's how you can support our community to continue its sustainability and growth. So we will get that local information, which is something we are all familiar with. We cannot get local information at the county level to a degree, but certainly down at the municipal levels. And when we work together, we can get that information out. We worked with the town of Hanover, and through the Employer One survey, they were able in the last 6 months to be able to offer local training to their employers. So we've had, about 70 or so employees go through the training that employers have identified through the Employer One survey. So it's not just about collecting information and saying we have it, it's about forming actions that respond to the information and the challenges that employers are facing. What do we do with this? In addition to what I've just mentioned, we create labor market information workshops. We take that out to the high schools. We work with the employment programs locally, because our goal is to make sure that the people that are making decisions around careers in our local community have all the information, or as much information as they need to make successful choices and decisions around training and employment. So we do go into the classrooms. In fact, in the last 6 weeks or so, we've been into many, many classrooms within our Bruce and Grey counties over the last few weeks. So again, we do have a copy of a local lens that we create. I have some hard copies here as well. They're available on our website at planningboard.ca, and it gives you just a flavor of what we've been able to collect, and which is what I shared with you today. If you want more detailed information as we enter this partnership, we will give you all of the raw data that we collect, so your staff can work with that around what the businesses are saying in your local community and be able to respond to them more on a timely basis. So we are looking for 92 responses minimal for the county for a statistically valid sample size, and then we are able to share that back with you once that's collected. The survey will be deployed in January of 2017. It's just open for 1 month, and we do a lot of pushing with our community partners to make sure that we get those responses, and the survey results and summary will be out by the end of March. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Gemma. Any questions? Yes, Milt.
If we are able to get a minimum of 20 responses per municipality, yes, we can. And it's just to make sure that we are able to keep the information confidential. We have increased anonymity in our survey. We don't need to know who the businesses are. We just need to know what the problems are the challenges are that you're experiencing. So if you can get a minimum of 20 responses for your municipality, you will have the raw data, and you can work with that data, for sure.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just maybe a comment that goes to a question. It's really encouraging to see that over 60% of employers in the area are planning to hire in 2016 from that survey. I guess the other side of that is the difficulty that they have in finding qualified people. So I wonder, the question is, how do you bridge that gap? I know going to the high schools perhaps is one part of it, but where do you see the problem in trying to address that gap?
Some of the challenges that we have noted, so on your survey in particular for Bruce County, we didn't hear this, but work ethic has been huge in all of our discussions that we have been having, where people are taking jobs. There are people out there looking for jobs, but they're not maintaining those jobs. So they will show up for maybe a week, maybe they won't make it through orientation, maybe they'll make it for 3 months, and then the employer either has to have them leave or they leave themselves. So we have a lot of work to do around building a strong work ethic in our community, for sure, and we're taking that message out. But the other part is that when you look at our population numbers, we're not growing in huge numbers, so we need to start looking at how do we attract the right talent for the businesses that are up and coming in our community. For instance, when we talk about that Gay Lee announcement, what are the skills that they're going to need and how immediate are those skills? Because if they are looking for talent that's already skilled, then we may need to have an attraction strategy outside of our four-county region to find that talent. So we need to start talking about that talent attraction piece and what are the key elements we need to develop within our community to make that work for us.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a great strategy. One of the strategies in our economic strategic plan was we know that our population is stagnant or falling, and that we would like to see that increased or growing modestly, I guess.
Yeah. Any others? Yes, Ann?
I don't know whether this is relevant or not. Gemma, you got the right name this time. But we feel in our area, we've been discussing this at our local economic development committee in the municipality of Kincardine, is we feel that our educational system, there's a kind of a disconnect there because we don't have much training in certain areas like that would encourage people to go into the trades or technology or what's needed in our area. And so that's a concern for us, and that's why we want to work with the school board on that. And so do you go to the school board on a regular basis and say what programs are offered in the schools and what your needs are and where there's a disconnect and could encourage improvement?
Yes, we do. We were actually, just last week, we were in Kincardine at the high school there, but goal in the next 12 months when we submit our business plan to the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development is to talk about apprenticeships. We know that we have an aging population of the workforce in, not apprenticeships in a broad sense of the word. I should say we're talking more skilled trades because there are over 170 apprenticeships. That includes ECE and hairdressing. What we want to talk about are those skilled trades, the plumbers, the millwrights, the welders, the ones that are actually very soon going to come short for us. It takes a long time, but what we also need to do is develop a sense of urgency within our businesses that will say we are open for business to train apprentices. This needs to grow in our community, and that's one of the ways that we can meet that need is by having businesses on board to say we are open to train apprentices, because if that doesn't happen, then we won't get to the next level. Our next goal for our next business year is to work with businesses in getting that information out, that urgent message out, and hopefully they will get on board with training as well.
Okay, we have a recommendation before us that the Planning and Development Committee authorize the Director of Planning and Development or his designate to sign the Memorandum of Understanding between the Four-County Labor Market Planning Board and Bruce County regarding the Employer One survey. Any further questions? Moved by Ann, seconded by Mitch. Any further questions? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Okay, we'll move on to the next delegation. We have David Ellingwood from Custa Planning.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it seems that these two items have collided at the perfect time because item 4B is a consent application that was at a staff level we were comfortable approving, but there's issues at the local municipality, and we require the consent of the local municipality to grant staff approval. So Jack has a report on that, and so maybe I would ask that Jack provide a summary of his report under 4B, because that sets up perfectly the delegation from Mr. Ellington, because that's why you're here. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you.
Good morning. So as Chris said, this is a
a consent that is somewhat controversial. It's a proposal for a vacant residential lot within a farming area. When staff initially reviewed this application, our thought had been that it may not be a good idea based on the agricultural consent policies at the 40-hectare parcel level. However, it was made clear to us that the original township lot fabric, which is what we use as the basis for determining the policies that apply, in this case is two 20-hectare lots that have merged together. And the original township lot that we're dealing with here is entirely within the rural designation, and so the rural consent policies apply. And these policies do permit limited non-farm residential lot creation. So with that information, we received the application. In order to minimize the loss of any farmland, we had recommended that they also apply for a minor variance to have a narrow driveway that wouldn't meet the lot frontage requirements of the bylaw. And the consultant for the applicant also identified a building envelope that meets all of the MDS setbacks to surrounding livestock facilities within the property. We circulated the application and we heard some neighborhood issues with respect to concerns about the loss of farmland, change in the viewscape, an impact on agricultural operations in the future, as well as concerns about the entrance location. And some suggestions that had been put forward were to find another house to live in, or an existing house in the area, or construct an addition or an additional dwelling within the farm cluster. As we note, the plan does permit this limited non-farm lot creation in this designation, and the consultant and the applicant identified this specific location as the best option within the lot for the dwelling. The application was brought forward to the municipality, the minor variance application, and it was defeated. And so that variance to reduce the driveway frontage was not permitted. And so the application was accordingly revised to meet the frontage requirements. And I believe the lot also became slightly shallower in order to, again, try to minimize the loss of any agricultural land. We also asked the municipality to provide conditions should the application be refused, and a motion for that was defeated. And so we don't have recommended conditions from the municipality or an endorsement of the consent. And so that's effectively why we're here. Should the committee wish to approve the application, we would recommend sort of the standard conditions that we would apply to a consent.
Okay. Questions from council? All right. First, David, would you like to make some comments, please? Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. So the application has been through a long process. By way of background, it's a bit of it's a family kind of situation. So you have a farm family where the new generation needs a place to live and still be able to work on the farm. So they're looking to have a separate residence, so they're not living with the parents. As was mentioned in the planning report, we have examined the entirety of the property to find the best possible siting from a planning perspective and environmental and other considerations. There's a drainage course through the property that makes parts of it not suitable for putting a dwelling or servicing. So that takes out quite a bit of the property. Also, in terms of sight lines, in discussion with the roads department was circulated to them, they determined this location where the driveway is proposed would provide a safe entrance way, and they would consider granting an entrance permit at that site. By positioning it against this side of the property, we all are avoiding dividing up the fields, so make it easier for the retained farmland to continue to be farmed. And we've also sought to minimize the size of the lot. So what we have here is the minimum frontage that is compliant with the area and ultimately zoning bylaw. And then the, from what Jack was referring to as our original concept is basically this one. We had shrunk down the frontage a bit at the planning department's suggestion. In this one that you have before you here, what we've also done is we've been able to shrink down the building envelope at the back of the lot in order to have that compliant frontage. So we've modified it to try to, again, minimize the impact on the farming. And you'll see there the different little lines passing through where we are staying out of any of the MDS setbacks, so there's no variance required from those as well. So kind of in summary, what you have before you here is it's an application in a rural area, so the consent policies would apply for a rural situation. We're avoiding fragmentation of farmland. We minimized the lot size on it. We are still, we're compliant with the retained farm size of 40 hectares. So we have consider the working farm size here that's being retained. And then in terms of the zoning, we're compliant now with the Aaron Ellerslie zoning, so we don't need a minor variance for the situation. It's kind of a consent that we're bringing forward to the committee this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We do have a recommendation before us that consent application B67 Irwin be approved. Are you moving?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, after.
I just want to clarify something. It's been my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm certainly not interested in telling you how to chair this meeting, because by the way, you're doing an excellent job. But the Musers are here, and it's my understanding Norm phoned in yesterday and said he would be allowed to speak. I talked to Glenn in the morning and said it's not on the agenda as a public meeting. We've held the public meeting, but you know, the applicant's been able to speak today. Do you know anything about it, Chris? I'm just thinking, it doesn't matter one way or the other, but I believe Norm was in the understanding he was going to be able to say a few words today.
So we did receive the request, and I'll tell you what our response is. It's a consent under the Planning Act, so the consents don't have public meetings because they're considered to be routine. Having said that, if you wish to make a delegation to the planning authority, you can do so. In this case, the neighbor has met the deadline. And what we suggested to the neighbor is that if he comes and he's interested in speaking, then the committee would consider passing a resolution to allow him as a delegation related to the file. The only hitch in this case, it's not like we already held the public meeting and we've heard everything. There has been no public meeting because the act no longer requires it. So by adding the neighbor who has concerns, I don't think in any way would prejudice the process because there is no requirement for the public meeting, and frankly, he's missed the deadline.
All right. I guess I would ask council's thoughts on this or I can make a decision myself, I guess, but
We need a motion.
we need a motion.
To allow the delegation and the majority.
Okay. Moved by Ann, seconded by Mike, that we do allow the delegation at this point. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, so we will hear the delegation this morning, and welcome.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate you being able to take the time to listen to me.
My name's Norm Muser. I live and farm directly across the road from the Irwins, east half of Lot 20. When I refer to we in this, I'm speaking on behalf of my wife Sandra and my father Glenn and mother Marie Muser, who also live within the minimum distance separation of this proposed lot. I guess what I'm here, I'm speaking in opposition to what is proposed in essence is 2 residential lots on the current 100 acres. It has been brought up, some of our concerns here on safety issues, future expansion of, I guess, my next generation and existing building locations that the Irwins could use for their new building, which could be on the existing lot. A couple questions I have concerning the severance of this land. The loophole in this farm back in the 1980s as 2 50-acre parcels, one 50-acre being fully rural and the other 50 acres being deemed agricultural, which obviously carries 2 different designations. I guess why not? It's not being severed into 2 50-acre parcels if second residence is wanting to be added to this. I believe at this time it's 1 roll number for 100 acres, which is it has been farmed as for a long time. Also, a question brought up at the municipal council as to why 50 acres is zoned rural and not agricultural like all the existing land around it, including our own. I think what needs to be addressed here is soil analysis by the planning department and this 50-acre parcel being looked at as being rezoned back to agricultural. The county recommends the severance meets all the criteria for rural land, does not take into consider the future. I guess that's what I'm looking at and why I'm here. I realize that the future's hard to predict, but past has shown several issues arising from farm lots being severed off of rural properties here, and with the intent being good at the time, but more ending up in non-rural raised people's hands and creating properties or issues down the road. In closing, I believe there are better options available than building a second residence on this 100-acre property, and I hope the council sees fit to look at those options. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I'll open it up to council for discussion. Mitch?
Chris, for clarification, I assume that these 2 properties merged on title and then everything reverted to the rural designation? Assuming that at some point these 2 properties merged on title, making it 1 parcel, thus reverting to the rural designation?
Yeah, that's under our understanding. The rural designation applies to the original township lot fabric, and so we're reviewing it on the basis of that 50 acres within the 100-acre lot.
Any other comments? Ann?
So are there other rural designations around there, or is most of it designated differently, like agricultural class, or the main class? Is it just the only exception in the area, or is it, I'm just curious.
begging the pardon of the committee. It is a pocket of rural land. I'd be pleased to provide a better map of the surrounding lands, if that is of interest to the committee. And here we have, actually, from the consultant's report, more readily located. A map shows approximately 90% of the 100-acre parcel is within the rural designation. Lands to the south are also within the rural designation, and the agricultural area is off to the northwest, and I'll just approach you to show.
Okay, thank you, Jack and David, for that clarification. Anything else from council? Paul?
I think there's all the presentations and Jack's presentation and the Muser's presentation. I believe they're all quite correct, but it doesn't really solve the issue. I just wanted to kind of clarify Aaron Ellersley's position on this. When the minor variance came to Aaron Ellersley, because we, like everyone else, don't support severances that take too much farmland out of production. And it's not been looked at, but when the severance, so the idea, the planning department and the Irwin's concept of narrowing the entrance by applying for a minor variance would have accomplished just that. But there was one member absent, so there were 6 members at council that day, including myself. And it became a 3-3 vote, so the motion was lost to approve the minor variance. But I am saying that the 3 people that voted against the minor variance clearly feel that they were opposing the severance. So Aaron Ellersley, in essence, 3 members of council of Aaron Ellersley are opposed to rural severances. And on farm and on excellent agricultural land, I am as well. However, there was a loophole found here on this particular property, in that it's rural property, and under our present rules and conditions, this severance meets all the criteria. So I'm having a tough time. I know the Musers won't like the fact that I'm supporting this severance, but they're good people. They'll get over it. This it's a loophole. I guess the point that I'm wanting to make then, Chris, is that if the Irwins decided not to apply for a minor variance, this matter would have went right to you as the chair of the head of planning, what's your official title as far as the severances go, to grant the severances, and this would have been a slam dunk and would have been approved because it meets all the criteria. So I don't know how we can actually turn this severance down based on the present criteria. And we're recognizing more and more often all throughout Bruce County that land classifications is quite inaccurate, because I agree 100% with the Musers. There's nothing rural about this land at all. This land is agricultural. This is excellent. This is excellent land. However, we've got this loophole of rural, and I would hope that in the future And where I see somewhere on the agenda, I think I was reading that we need, Bruce County needs to start updating our own official plan in the very near future, that it needs to be a matter to be addressed. I don't think this, I guess I'm waiting on the answer to the one question, and I'll let it go at that.
So yes, this would have been, so my job and Mr. Stickney's job, we've been delegated as the Secretary-Treasurer of the Land Division Committee. And by bylaw, this committee, which is the Land Division Committee, has delegated those powers to staff. And probably 99% of them are routine severance approvals. On occasion, 4 or 5, 6 times a year, they would come back here because there's one that I would not approve, feeling that it doesn't meet your policies that you've given me, and then asking the committee to make a decision, so I would give up my power. The delegation bylaw has a pretty good out there. It says, the kind of concept is we don't create lots in a municipality unless they know about it, and they also agree. And so on the odd occasion, we have one where we don't have the approval of the local municipality. And so I'm bound then on behalf of the community and the applicant and everybody else to still take it through the process and ask you to make a decision that I would be barred from making under the delegation bylaw. So yes, this is one that we would approve. In terms of the county mapping, those lands squarely belong within the rural designation based on the criteria that was used in the plan that goes by Canadian Land Inventory. And what's happened is that because of technology has changed and cropping is more sophisticated and more lands are being tiled, there are lands that were marginal grasslands in the rural designation that have been converted to high-value cropland at a rate that's been exponential in the last 10 years or so. So the mapping is correct in terms of the criteria that was adapted at the time. And it looked at blocks of 40 hectares as being a blob. And if that blob was predominantly class 1 to 3 would be agriculture. If there's and sometimes there are smaller pockets of higher priority land caught within there, but it's still based on the 40 hectare criteria is either in, or actually I think it might be 80 hectare criteria. Whatever the criteria is, would be how it's mapped. But what you're seeing is more and more rural areas being brought into higher level of production than you've seen in the past.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else from council? We have the recommendation before us that consent application B67 Irwin be approved. Any further discussion? Moved by Milt, second by Robert. Any further discussion?
Yeah, and it's just an unfortunate situation, I guess, but we have to work with what we have today. And I think the designation, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the designation is rural.
Yes.
So that's the policy we have to follow, and if it's truly agricultural land, which I agree with Paul, it probably is, then it's unfortunate. But I support.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to action items. The first one, 4A, 4 County Labor Board for Employer One Survey. We've heard about it.
Yep.
It will move forward. Any other comments on that, Chris? No?
No.
No. The next one, consent application Irwin, we've pretty much dealt with that. The next one, action item C, consent application number B65, 16.34. Modified recommendations from the application, so we need to deal with this one.
Thank you. I think I've explained a lot of the background for this application in the last one, is that again, staff approvals, and we can grant staff approvals. And there's some times where there's some hitch associated with an application or something fundamentally that we don't feel comfortable giving a professional approval to, that we would bring back to the committee. And it's interesting because we've seen one very similar to this actually at last month's meeting, and this was in Brockton. We had a situation where there was a heritage-style farmhouse, and it had some, someone would argue, marginal land that could not be cash cropped, and I would argue should have belonged with the host farm, but there was a strong feeling that that would logically belong with the house, and so a dispute simply over the lot area in the committee. Committee approved that one. What we have here is maybe slightly different, and I think it was referenced by Councillor Eagleson in terms of cropland associated with buildings. And on the screen is a picture of the farm. This is Bruce County Road 19, close to the intersection. I think it's concession, I'll let you know the concession road, a few kilometers north of Walkerton. And this is an interesting application because the lands are designated in the agricultural designation, and of course the person who's applying for this is a bona fide farmer. There's no issues associated with it. And this house, you've likely driven by it many times. It's what I would describe an executive style house built in 2007. But it still qualifies under our policies as a surplus farm dwelling, and there's not necessarily an issue with that. What the issue in my mind with this one is really the lot size. So I would be comfortable at a staff level approving this with the house and all the outbuildings with a flag-shaped driveway. And in this case, what the applicant is asking for is a lot size of 5 acres, which would include the tillable acreage in front of the building. So there's a further picture of the lot in the blue. Is you can see on your screen the preference submitted by the applicant at 4.7 acres, and then you can see the field in the front. And what I would feel comfortable approving at a staff level would be just slightly under 3 acres. So similar to some of the comments we've heard in the past about wanting to have larger parcels in the countryside and so on and so forth. Again, a little bit different than the one we dealt with last month because this is pretty clearly cash crop land. So again, as a matter of routine, although it's a newer building, it still qualifies in my mind as a surplus dwelling and should not be barred from approval. However, I would make a recommendation that it be approved, but the application be modified to reflect a more reasonable lot area, and that's reflected in the actual, I'll take you back to the actual resolution. This would be provided at approval of 2.78 acres as modified and versus the 4.72 acres severance as requested by the applicants. I won't take you through a big long explanation in terms of how we filter these, but the main points are both in your plan and at the provincial level is the policies are around severing off the surplus residents as opposed to the creation of hobby farms. And then recognizing in some cases you have to take some land because there's outbuildings associated with it, and you don't want to create an MDS problem by having, buildings right beside the house. So sometimes you have to expand it a bit to take in the buildings, which we have in this case, not an issue. Driveways are typically fairly long in these cases, so that brings in some land as well. And then you have a normal amenity area associated with the house. You need a front yard, and you need a tile bed area, and you need some room to move around. There's hedges and trees and so on and so forth. And these are these areas that have typically been associated with the farmstead. And from a staff perspective, where I would sort of draw the line on that is that the intent is not to bring in land that's currently being cropped. And that is the reason why the application is here, because the applicant's preference is different than what it feel comfortable providing a staff approval for.
Thank you, Chris. Comments from council? Yes, Ann?
So, have we approved this extra size before? Sometimes it's good to have buffer areas in the country. Like I think of my grandfather's property and that was severed off, and so we farmed all around it, and it was the only trees. The people there planted trees on the extra acreage, and you know, I've still said we should have planted trees right back to the end of the farm, because when you get a whole 1,000 acres where there's no trees, it's kind of good to have a few buffer areas. So I really don't have any problem with, you know, squaring it off, because often those types of properties act as a buffer area. But is there any precedence? Do we normally do this, or do we usually stick to the smaller one? I know I can think of one or two that have been done over the years just because it doesn't fit. There's a river running through, or buildings don't fit. So that's my question.
Okay, just you can see in the report that Brockton Council did approve the application. And I guess it's a feeling of council that we have maybe too many flag-shaped lots in the country, that you have the long laneway, and then you have a rectangle area at the back end. So it was their opinion that that this application should go forward at the 1.91 hectare size, at the 4.7 acres. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I have a recommendation that Bruce County consent application B651634 for a surplus farm dwelling severance of 1.13 hectares, 2.78 acres, as modified and recommended by the Planning Department, be approved versus the 1.91 hectare, 4.72 acres severance as requested by the applicant. Any further comment from council? You're clear that?
This is for the smaller.
Yes, yes. Yes? No? Okay. I'll call the question on the recommendation. If it's approved, if it's not approved, then we move to something else. Moved by Milt, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. Can we then change the recommendation to the larger amount? I would ask for a mover and a seconder. Ann and Mike, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, item number D, Business Enterprise Center space requirement. Chris.
Recommendation that the committee approve the relocation of the Business Enterprise Center core functions to operate out of the library headquarters commencing December 1st, 2016. Secondly, that the Planning and Development Committee authorize staff to communicate with the town of Saugeen Shores on the decision to terminate the lease agreement as of December 31st while maintaining the presence of the Enterprise Center in Saugeen Shores.
Recommendation that the Planning, Development Committee approve the relocation of the Business Enterprise Center functions to operate out of the library headquarters in Port Elgin commencing December 1st, 2016. And you can see the following part been presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Milt, seconded by Robert. Discussion. Mike?
We were in the library yesterday, and are you going to be ready by December the 1st?
Our hope is to be there by December 1st, and that would be my commitment. The issue with the library is we were also working with others to make sure that the renovation fits long-term and is expandable, scalable for other, should there be other people there. So the plan of just simply putting in some portable dividers on a temporary basis seems to be maybe not the right way to go. One of the aspects of it is there's the boardroom, and so one potential aspect is to split the boardroom initially into 2 meeting rooms. So in discussion with our people who are undertaking the renovations, it would be to do the boardroom first, and that way provide temporary space for the BEC employees if the other renovations take longer. So we're still committed to the date in terms of what that would look like. It may be temporary in the absence of those bigger renovations.
Okay. Did I call the vote? No. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 4E, which is the official plan amendment, and that's for the bona fide farmer. Chris?
It seems to be agricultural day at the committee. Bonfield was a public meeting that was held at the last committee meeting, and for the purpose for people to have input and so on, for council to understand the issues before them. And what we have is a situation whereby Bonfield is a private company, an investment company that raises capital in order to buy properties, and the properties are then leased back to various farmers through long-term lease agreements. In the way the county plan has operated in the past, and I think this is the first time we've seen an application like this, is that we recognize that there is corporate farms out there, and the corporate farms apply all the time for surplus farm dwellings, and it's not a problem, and it's been a recognition that a corporate farm can meet the definition of a bona fide farmer. When we received this application, it was my thinking very strongly at the time that if you look at the definition of what is a bona fide farmer, this type of investment company does not meet that, and as such, we've received an amendment to the county plan along with the application. So basically exempt Bonfield Corporation from the requirements of bona fide farmer. At the previous public meeting, there was presentations made by representatives from Bonfield, and to make a compelling argument from them of the benefits this type of model has for the countryside in terms of yet another option for farmers looking to recapitalize leased land as part of what's in their portfolio or otherwise. The problematic aspect of the way the plan is set up is that the policies allowing for surplus farm dwellings have been around since the early 70s under the old food land guidelines, I think they were called at the time. And they basically allowed for exceptions if you're a farmer. And it said in the countryside we want to have large lots, we don't want to have residential uses in the countryside. But they made an exception and said if you're a bona fide farmer, you can only live in one house. And so therefore, as you buy your second 100 acres, your third 100 acres, you can sever those off, and they wouldn't be vacant. You didn't have to rip them down, and at least there'd be some assessment in the countryside. And on top of that, initially, they also had the surplus, the retirement lots policies. Since that time, we find ourselves 30, 40 years later, where the same principles and concepts of being a bona fide farmer and being really the only type of an activity where you would get a break to those broader policies in the countryside as if you're bona fide and would allow you to sever off a surplus farm dwelling. So there's been a high level of take-up as farms expand. When we did the 5-year review, we had a discussion about whether or not these policies should stay in the plan. And in fact, there was a lot of support at the time. We looked at reviewing whether they should be taken out, whether they're detrimental, whether it would leave room for the horse-drawn buggy community as they're having a harder and harder time finding farmlands with houses on them. And in the end, County Council decided that they would move forward and keep those policies in place, and they remain in the plan. And they remain a good way for farmers to sever off the house, get capital, and continue to farm. I would argue that in this case, although Bonfield, in my mind, is not a bona fide farmers, the end result of what they're doing is the same, to the extent that there's a restriction placed on the surplus land. Nobody can use that land other than if you are a farmer. It can't be put to any other use. I mean, potentially somebody could buy it and let it sit idle, but it's too valuable. And so in this way then, Bonfield and these types of corporations are free to go out and purchase land in the countryside. And they're free to purchase lands that don't have buildings on them. They already have the restriction, and they're free to buy those up and assemble them and lease them out and rent them. The only problematic aspect in the Bruce County context at all is the concept of a bona fide farmer. And that's why there is the hitch in this case. I would argue that given the reference to a bona fide farmer in the county plan, that clause is a very important underpinning to that county plan as a break. And that, you know, residential uses should go to urban areas, but this break is allowed for bona fide farmers. And in the absence of any evidence of bona fide farmer, I would argue that the initial overall intent and goals and objectives of providing the break in the first instance, the overall goal and intent of the plan is not met. So, as a result of the further review of the application, I would say on that basis, it's a fairly big departure and should be refused. I would say, and I would admit to you that although it is a qualifying criteria, the end result of it is still that the same as if it was a bona fide farmer. It just really is a different business model where the people buying them up don't have to be farmers. They don't have to have any relationship to the land or to be actively farming them. It's a different model altogether. In Ontario, unlike other jurisdictions, we don't really have the types of foreign investment controls in place as some other areas, such as some of the prairie provinces who regulate this type of thing and see it as an issue in the countryside. So in the absence of anything like that at the provincial level, it seems that the only hitch for this is the bona fide farmer provision. So again, in my mind, a fairly big departure from what the plan intended to do. Again, the end effect on the land is not much different than if it was a bona fide farmer. You'll see later on today a further report coming forward looking at maybe we're currently involved in updating the hazard provisions of the plan, and then the mapping people have been contracted, and that's moving forward. And it seems that a lot of the issues that we deal with are some of these smaller issues in the countryside, so perhaps a time to take the rural and agricultural policies and open them up for review moving into 2017, so we have a better understanding of what's there and what could potentially be changed. If you're going to approve this application, I would suggest that it would be a one-off consideration not to be treated as any type of a precedent for further applications, and that we do undertake a healthy review of the policies and determine whether you even want to refer to what is a bona fide farmer in the plan at all. So that's a quick, hopefully that was quick, summary rundown of the review of the application.
Okay, thanks.
Wasn't too quick, was it?
Wasn't too quick. No. Okay, we have the recommendation before us. I'll read it, that Bruce County Official Plan Amendment Number 211, 1626 be refused. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
I'll move it again to get it on the table. I'm still confused, but I think, before we try to follow our policies as much as possible, and it's something that should be dealt with at the provincial level as far as these big companies moving in, and it's kind of out of our jurisdiction.
So
But I'll move it.
You're moving it. Do I have a seconder? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second it. I don't support it. I don't support the recommendation, but I will second it.
It's on the table. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, wait a minute. We need discussion. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't support the motion either, and I think one of the reasons, I think this, what we could do, I mean, this, if Bonneville really wants to sever this, they can do it legally, and they can transfer the land and go through a big hoop and getting the bona fide farmer to make the application and then go back and potentially, I've seen that happen a number of times, and I think, then what is the point? What is the point of saying no? Because I struggle with that part of it. Some of the things, I really like some of your comments about, protecting bigger lots, and I think the Bruce County Official Plan has done an excellent job of that, because if you go around the county now, there is more productive farmland every year in bigger lots, and we've done very good on that. But I think in this particular case, I would support this, because I think it really is, if you struggle with the bona fide farmer, we're playing with words here, because these people, the people that are going to be in that house, or most of the land are going to be farmers, in this particular case. So I think we need to, this is an innovative way where farming is going, and will be going more and more. And, I think part of the reason that that the plan envisioned these was, these are viable houses and buildings, and lots of people in the country, or big farmers, don't want to be tenants. They want to farm and be away from the headache of a tenant. So you either knock the building down, which I think is a tragedy in some cases, or you try and go through this. So it's a lot. I'm going to say I can't support the motion.
Okay. Other comments? Ann?
Well, I'm conflicted, because I really hate to see our farmland going to investment companies. I just think that's the wrong path to go down. One little, we can pass it and everything, but I would just ask that support from fellow councillors, that I'm not so sure we want to go down this road where it's just opened up to any investment in farmland, and there doesn't seem to be any restrictions in Ontario like there are other provinces. So as an agenda item, I know it's maybe not within this, but I just don't like that. And I know there's not a great difference with some corporate farmers who are, living on farmland elsewhere, but I think it's a slippery slope. But I'm willing to support this one instance, but I think we need to have a discussion on where we want farmland in Ontario to go. I think it's important.
All right, good point. Yes, Milt?
If there was no building here, would there be no discussion? And it's over and it's happened. And the thing that I do, this land remains in farmland, and it gives people that may not have the resources to buy farmland an opportunity to rent farmland. And there's all kinds of that going on now. Farmland being rented like crazy. So I just don't, I just can't support it. I think going forward, this is going forward. And I agree with Chris, though, we need to have a discussion about our ag policies, for sure. And this is a one-off, that's fine with me.
Okay, any others? All right, I'll have to carry on with this motion that Bruce County Official Plan Amendment number 211, 1626 be refused. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. Can we amend it to say that this is a one-off? Is that, do I have consensus, or you can't do that? No.
So through you,
Work with Chris a little bit.
That was a recommendation in the report, not in the, it was in the body of the report, not in the recommendation.
through you, Mr. Chair, what I would recommend is that the motion be read in if there's a mover and seconder for the amendment number, Bruce County Official Plan Amendment number 211-16.26 be approved, and further that staff be asked to return with a draft policy to address future applications.
That motion, you've heard that motion. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Milt, Mike, and any further discussion?
A question with regards to the draft policy. Is that something that should be entrenched with the items that we're going to be dealing with through the official plan? So not maybe necessarily to bring a policy back to the next meeting, but to incorporate it into the, for discussion. Okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We can move down to the municipal board review, which is attached. Chris, do you want to make some comments?
Sure. Just by way of introduction, lots of provincial reviews out there. It's hard to keep up. Municipal Act coming, Planning Act just done, provincial plan review, escarpment plan review, so on and so forth. So I've asked, as Bruce is sort of the most familiar with how the Ontario Municipal Board hits home, I've asked him to take a preliminary look at this and then provide some recommendations in these tables. And you must know that when we provide these reports, it's a sort of a first kick at the cat, and under the comments and so on, that represents our feeling at a staff level where this should be heading. And if council disagrees with it, that's fine, as this is a draft for consideration.
Okay, thanks. The report here is a bit of an overview of what's been proposed by the province related to the Ontario Municipal Board, and they have fairly strongly stated that they see the continued need for the Ontario Municipal Board in the province of Ontario. So they have indicated that they're not really considering abolishing the Ontario Municipal Board as part of this review, but trying to make it better, stronger, more efficient, and providing quicker decisions to developers, landowners, municipalities across the province. So in their statement or their objective, they have declared that the government will consider the OMB's scope, what it deals with essentially, and the effectiveness to determine improvements with respect to how the board works within the Ontario's broader land use planning system. So that's the objective that they've set out for this review. There are a couple of links provided there at the bottom of the first page of my report that would take you to this document, which is called the Review of the Ontario Municipal Board Public Consultation Document that was printed in October 2016, so last month. I took the opportunity to read that and also attend a session at the University of Guelph where they provided an opportunity to the people at that meeting or forum to provide comments back to the provincial representatives that are leading the review. So I'm not going to get into what happened at that meeting because it was generally an information meeting and there were plenty of questions about what the changes were intended to do and include and so on. But there is in this document the items that are listed in the table in my report, and if I can, I'd like to go through those as quickly as possible, but at least give you some indication of what they're considering. And to start off, they are doing a review and they have several sections that they've identified that they're going to be reviewing or looking at that are sort of grouped together in some similar themes or whatever. The first one is the OMB's jurisdiction away from the public as opposed to giving more participation opportunities for the public, and it seems to be going in the wrong direction, perhaps. Limitations being placed on what matters could be appealed. The next one is transit, and we don't really have too much of an issue with that one way or the other, I don't think. And it wouldn't really impact us too much here, so that could easily be supported. Giving communities a stronger voice, this is a lot of what's in Bill 73, which were the amendments made to the Planning Act this year. A lot of that is about giving communities a stronger voice, so this seems to be consistent with what they're doing in other areas, so that's easily supported. They also mentioned moving away from de novo hearings, and this is where evidence is heard from the beginning and the board member would be given a complete, the complete context and background for a particular application rather than simply dealing with a disputed issue. And it seems to me, and again, this is partly because I believe that the board has been able to do a reasonably good job in adjudicating things, that there may be a loss here of understanding by the board of how a particular issue fits into the context of an application and hence an appeal. And by not holding a de novo hearing, there would be more emphasis perhaps on the municipality participating in those hearings to provide their comments and support of the application that's before the board, as well as any decisions that the board might be making, which could lead to higher costs, perhaps for hearing processes and so on, being incurred by the municipality. In a sense, a downloading of some of that responsibility. The transition of the use of planning rules and so on, this is looking at trying to use current policies or evolving policies or policy directions that might be in play at the time of an application being given consideration at a hearing. And the problem with that is that it sets a moving target for all development. So typically what we like to be able to do is provide some clear direction to developers and so on so that they understand the rules of the game and the things that are expected of them in terms of what they need to do, studies they need to provide, and so on and so forth. And by opening it up to consider everything that's going on at the same time a development is being planned, I think would provide, create a heavy burden for the developer to be able to keep up, understand what they need to do to meet the requirements, and it also provides a similar load on planners reviewing an application when the targets are moving. The second part of it is citizen participation and local perspective, and again, I mentioned that Bill 73 dealt with a lot of that in the Planning Act. They're talking about other matters, though, such as the government considering expanding the Citizen Liaison Office, which exists now, but the province has 2 or 3 people, I believe, in the Citizens Liaison Office. It's really not terribly accessible to the public other than for very general type questions and so on. And there really isn't an onus on the province to have planners, legal advisors and so on available to the public in that office now, and they're simply putting it out there whether or not the province should be expanding that to provide answers for citizens calling with concerns and needing clarification, or even going the next step further and providing professional services to individuals who either choose not to hire their own planners, lawyers, and so on, or who can't afford it. And those types of things, while they're very good from the public side of things in providing those support mechanisms, it does create an additional burden on the taxpayers again to support all those programs. And so, and I come back again to the board's current history and the good work that they do, and I really feel that that's maybe going too far, and I wouldn't recommend that myself. Clear and predictable decision-making was another area. They are suggesting that maybe multi-member panels, and the environmental panel is still a multi-member panel. But the board has typically only used one member to adjudicate planning matters. So they're asking the question or opening up for debate the use of multi-member panels to conduct complex hearings, or in fact going even further and providing them for all hearings. I think, again, it's more than is needed under the circumstances. While there may be situations where you have very, very controversial files or appeals where a multi-member panel may be able to adjudicate better, but by and large, the decisions coming back from the municipal board on average are not bad decisions. Modern procedures and faster decisions, I think everybody would endorse a lot of that part of it. So the first few items in that list I would support. They include allowing the OMB to adopt less complex and more accessible tribunal procedures so that people can better understand what's going on in hearings, and I think that's perfectly fine. Allow active adjudication, and this is where the board member could cross-examine and do things himself or herself in a hearing situation in order to draw out evidence that is needed for their decision. Modernize procedures and promote faster decisions, absolutely supported. The only ones that I had concern with would be increasing flexibility for how evidence can be heard. This kind of gets to the point of disclosure of evidence so that all parties have the same opportunity to prepare an argument or rebuttal to any evidence that's being heard, and I'm not sure how far they intend to go with that, so that's a point where I would ask for clarification. Introducing maximum days allowed for hearings. To me, there's a risk there that rushing through a hearing doesn't necessarily give you the best decision. And so in very rare cases, there may be long, drawn-out hearings, and obviously there might be better ways of dealing with some of the issues. But I think they've picked up on that point later on whereby, and I'll mention in a moment, whereby they could deal with that more effectively without necessarily setting time limits on hearings. So that one in particular, I don't feel is the best direction to go. So then finally, the last section is alternate dispute resolution and fewer hearings. They suggest possibly more actively promoting mediation. I think that's good. If we can mediate issues between disagreeing parties and resolve them without going to hearings, it saves money on both sides, the municipality and the public, and is probably the best approach to be used if we can. Requiring all appeals to be considered by a mediator before scheduling a hearing, possibly yes, maybe that is the way to go, is to investigate that opportunity a little more vigorously before a hearing is set. Allowing government mediators to be available at all times during an application process, I think is going beyond what's needed. Generally, the majority of applications, there wouldn't be any need for that. I think the process still works, so it doesn't require that type of intervention. The last item, strengthening the case management at the OMB to better stream scope issues in dispute and so on. This is where I feel the focus should be, not on that other item, by setting maximum length of hearings. By scoping things down, dealing with some things perhaps outside of a hearing, where subject matter experts can review or deal with things in dispute, may be a more efficient way of handling those things in an attempt to control the length of hearings. So this is an information report, but there is a deadline for comments to the board, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it in this report or not, but it's December 15th, I believe it is, which was the day after our next, I think it was the next day after our next committee meeting, and I felt perhaps if we could get consensus at this point in time, it gives us a little more time to get these comments to the board. So I'm looking for the committee to provide some direction to myself or the department to either forward or provide me with some comments as amendments that you might like to have in the comments that are provided in the report.
Thank you, Bruce. We have a recommendation. The review of the Ontario Municipal Board report is for information, and that the committee directs staff to submit this report as the County of Bruce comments regarding the proposed changes stemming from the Ontario Municipal Board review. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Ann? Mitch? Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to 4G, the trademark agreement. Chris?
Yep. So as you know, we have the new brand and tagline. We've been looking at how we go about having this trademarked and whether we use lawyers or do it ourselves. Funny enough, there are consulting companies out there who handle these types of applications. And so the purpose of this report is to give you some background in terms of the provider. The agreement outlines the process, and there's a recommendation that we enter into an engagement letter with Smart and Bigger to provide legal services with the registration of the trademark.
Recommendation that the Planning and Development Committee authorize Chris LaForest, Director of Planning and Development, or designate to sign the engagement letter with Smart and Bigger to provide legal services in connection with trademark applications for the county's logo, icon, and tagline. I have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Mike, seconded by Robert. Discussion? Paul?
I'll support the motion, but just wondering, like, who in their wildest imagination would want to steal our logo there? Do you have anybody in mind that would be that stupid?
Okay, we'll take that comment for what it's worth. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor of the motion, opposed? Carried. Thank you. Blue Water District School Board Accommodation Review.
This is, as you know, we've, the CAO, in addition to some of our planning staff, have attended some of the meetings with the accommodation review. And as always, is always the case, we're reluctant to jump in and be involved in other jurisdictions in terms of their methodologies of how they make decisions regarding school and accommodations. In this case, we've been following the process, and we feel that there's potentially some new information that is coming to light in terms of newer population projections, particularly with regard to the expansion of the Bruce nuclear site. And we really feel it's incumbent upon us to make a pitch to the school board and ask them to review and update the report that was done by Watson that looks at the enrollment numbers in light of some of the newer demographics and numbers that are coming out. And so there's a recommendation then that we make that overture towards the board. And additionally, if they require financial support to update those numbers, we make a subsequent offer as well.
All right, thank you. You see the recommendation before you. Chris has outlined that very well. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Paul, seconded by Mike. Discussion? Is Bruce, are you speaking?
I thought I would be giving this report, but just at this point, maybe it's important to give you some information that there was a letter sent to Mr. Cummings, the superintendent of the business service at Blue Water District School Board, by our CAO on November 8th. That was about the same time that this report was being prepared, and the CAO may want to provide a few comments about that, if you would provide that opportunity.
Sure. Kelly?
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, the content of the letter outlines effectively that when Watson and Associates were contracted to do their various planning study work for this particular area, Area 1 within the Blue Water District School Board, no one was aware of the impact or even that the contract had been signed between the province of Ontario and Bruce Power. In addition to that, the letter also outlines that there is some concern that the wider MUSH sector, or municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, need to maybe do a bit better job of coordinating strategic items so that it's to the benefit of the citizens for the county. In particular, there is concern that the mechanism, and in particular the Watson report, if that continues to be adopted and utilized by the school board, it will have far-reaching impacts for the county of Bruce, whether you are a school in the peninsula area or a school in the southern part of Bruce County. There are ramifications for this particular issue. And then I guess finally is in support of the school board, some of the recent funding announcements and formulas that have been adopted at the province are really affecting the rural part of Ontario, and that probably can't be stressed enough, but is something in addition to this that is of concern.
Thank you for those comments. Mitch?
I'm wondering too if we shouldn't add in the natural gas report as part of this. And I know for here in Kinloss and South Bruce, there's been economic studies done with the possibility of Bruce County being a host to a second DGR. Those impact, like it's just, that material's all been done and with consultants, so if we forwarded that on as well for potential, just as part of our package, that, and using Kincardin's deep geological repository, the possibility there, like where, you know, the announcement could come as soon as December, January, we don't know. And that impact on Kincardin and Bruce County as well. So I think if we add all that in as a package, that there's a lot going on in Bruce County.
Good idea. Thanks. Ann?
I think it's a concern everywhere in Bruce County that there's the provincial policy doesn't suit rural areas, and I think that's behind it all. They're just applying the you know, the one policy to the cities and the rural areas, and I don't think there's an understanding, as Mitch says, the natural gas, for the Paisley example, if they get natural gas in that area, I think that'll make a big difference, as well as I was discussing with our local school board trustee. This report has been updated for September 2016, but we still felt that the numbers were under, considering the refurbishment of the Bruce, the possible DGR, natural gas coming into the area. For certain areas will definitely make a difference. So, you know, I support this, but I think your emphasis that, you know, it's a provincial, it's part of the provincial policy that's sort of hamstringing everything as well. But the numbers, I think, in the Watson report are low for what's happening in our area.
Thank you all for that. We do have some suggestions then to add to our recommendation for information to go forward to the school board. You heard, yes, Paul, a comment?
I like the recommendation, but I have a little bit of hesitation on the recommendation. So you're suggesting that we would be willing to supply some financial support to the school board, asking them to retain Watson and Associates just to simply update the report. And what about doing our own peer report of the Watson and Associate report? I guess I'm still nervous with what type of an update Watson and Associates will do, given that information, because it's very clear the school board has a plan to follow through with, and they're doing the hiring of the Watson and Associates. I would just trust more if we hired folks with the right credentials to do our own peer review.
So, Paul, Watson's already done a review, right?
Correct. They've done two of them with a pre-proposed agenda, and they managed to do another one. And we've mentioned that at the meeting back, when was that, Kelly? The 20th of what? I lost track of time. September, October maybe. And right at that meeting, it was stressed when Kelly asked the question that the report was updated in 2016. You were there, Bruce. And there's a councillor from Walkerton that has talked to me quite a bit about the report. There's things missing in the report that I'm not so sure that the school board want to hear.
So I'm just kind of confused. So we're asking that Watson update it again, and it's just been updated in 2016, or just?
Through you, Mr. Chair, indeed, the recommendation was maybe halfway, and to Councillor Eagleson's comment, perhaps the consideration is that we do a full-scale peer review, but the suggestion was that they be requested again to update the numbers based on the fact that their data was collected prior to the announcement of Bruce Power. If committee feels it's possibly more accurate information to do a full-scale peer review, that would probably be in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000. And I do understand and think it is wise possibly to spend that money, because then it would be fully objective. And that's not to suggest that any funny business, but everyone could then have reassurance that it is fully objective and the consultants would be working for the county versus working for the school board. The other piece that maybe should have also been highlighted was, with this recent ARC review, it's the first time that I have seen where the philosophy towards schools has started to change, in that it used to be that school boards looked at the financial health of the schools as a group. With this review, it's now become very apparent that they're looking at the financial health of individual schools. And that's a big difference.
Yes, and I suppose that's happened because of the provincial way of the formula. They fund the school board and encourage the school boards to be efficient for each school and work from that. So,
I think it's important, so I would support Paul's comments about an independent. That way, our residents know and understand that whatever that report may reveal, that it was independent and that it was a thorough investigation done into what's going on with the ARC review. So that, I would second Paul's.
okay. We do have a motion on the floor. We can leave that if you wish. We can withdraw that, or we can defeat it, or just go with it as well as our own recommendations or our own review. It's up to council.
Through you, Mr. Chair, given it's not a land use planning application, if the mover and seconder, which were Councillor Eagleson and Councillor Smith, if they were agreeable to a friendly amendment, and that the second
Moved by, as we have movers, yeah. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Oh, we're going to work through it. Bruce County official plan updates attached. We're in the process of updating, so Chris?
Of issues reports on the plan some time ago, and then a number of the issues reports were simply not brought back forth to council. We started to focus on the hazard issue as the partnership with Northern Bruce Peninsula, and at the same time to begin restructuring the departments around the 3-hub model. I think it's about time that we bring back the issues reports and update them. There's since been a new provincial policy statement out there as well that has some things in there we should probably learn up on. And it seems that really we keep on hitting on the same 3 or 4 issues in the countryside. And so maybe time to review that. The plan is not that old, but we should take a look at those central policies. In the countryside, it's really the rural policies and the agricultural policies. And so this report recommends that we dig out the issues reports, update them, and come back with a more comprehensive report back to the committee in the new year. And we begin that process, first of all, by making council sort of comfortable with the existing policy context, generate some ideas in terms of where we should be heading, and then undertake some public consultation on that. And so we would provide you back with some details in the new year in terms of what type of consultation that should be. As you're aware, oftentimes we hold workshops and open houses, and not a lot of people show up because we're talking about policy. And so we'll maybe be looking at some interesting ways where we can engage the community at perhaps an individual and group level to try to figure out what they feel is the future of the agriculture and rural area in the community. And those policies can reflect what we've heard. So that is an information report. And with your general agreement, we'll start putting some horsepower towards this in the new year.
Okay, that's good. The recommendation of the County of Bruce Official Plan Review Report is for information, is intended to provide a brief update to council of the current plans as we begin our review of the county official plan. Moved by Robert, seconded by Mitch. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Next meeting is December the 15th. I need a motion to adjourn. Milt and Paul, all in favor? Carried.